And welcome, folks. This is the Appraiser Coach Podcast. My name is Dustin Harris. Welcome to the show, folks. I really appreciate you tuning in. It's a new experience being on YouTube the last couple of weeks, but it's been fun. It's been fun to watch the numbers grow, and it's been fun to get the word out that way, as well as through Stitcher Radio and iTunes, which, of course, you can still listen to the audio, and I encourage you to do so. I want to remind those that are watching online that this does go through a bit of an editing process when you're talking on the audio side of things, but decided to kind of keep the raw feed going as far as the the video goes. You get the behind the scenes look, if you will, on what happens at the Appraiser Coach Podcast. So I just want to thank all of you who are both listening and watching out there, and have a topic today that it's been on my mind quite a bit the last little while, and thought that I would get some information out there. I want to pause here first and remind you that we are sponsored by three great companies. First of all, Alamode has been providing great software for appraisers for over 30 years. I've been using them for over 2 decades. Right now, you can get a 10-year price guarantee at $349 per year. Just go to alamode.com. Just got off the phone with the people from DataMaster just this morning, and getting my feedback and giving my feedback to them on their new products that are coming out. Folks, if you're not involved with DataMaster, check them out right now. You can go to datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. That's datamasterfreetrial.com/coach for your full 14-day free trial. And finally, we are sponsored by OREP. OREP right now is accepting applications for E&O insurance. Folks, if you have not checked out OREP, you need to. They are different than the other companies out there. Find out why at orep.org. That's OREP.org. Well, folks, today I want to talk a little about something that might be a little bit boring, but stick with me because I think this is important. And this really goes to the heart of the appraisal process and the methodologies that we use, and then again, how we report those methodologies. Now, I want to pause here and remind you that I am not a USPAP instructor. I have been accused of that in the past, but I can assure you that I am not. I am not a USPAP expert. I am a schmo with a microphone giving my opinion. Now, this opinion is rooted in my own 22 years of being a real estate appraiser, as well as associating with, rubbing shoulders with, mentoring other appraisers across the nation. So I come to this with a little bit of clout, but that being said, I would never come to you and say that I know everything there is to know on this subject. I may completely be out to lunch on this, and if I am, I want to know about it. You know that I encourage your feedback. The feedback can come into us on our website, theappraisercoach.com. You just have to scroll down to the podcast link and click on there, find this episode, and right below the episode, you can comment. Now that we're on YouTube, you can do the same thing with YouTube. YouTube does allow comments, and I encourage the comments. Now, folks, don't hold back if you have a different opinion of something than what I have. I encourage that. I want you to reach out to me. I want you to tell me if I'm completely wrong. I want you, now do it nicely. Let's be kind here. But I want you to reach out to me and let me know if I am wrong or if you have a different opinion. And maybe it's not that I'm wrong. It's maybe, just a different way of looking at things. One way or another, I am open to anything you have to share with me. I'm just going to share with you my opinion today, but it is an opinion, again, rooted in experience and associating with other appraisers, and it has to do with reconciliation. Let's set it up this way. By the way, I should pause here and just say, normally this podcast is all about how to improve your appraisal business. Every once in a while, we do foray into some of these other subjects, such as how to improve your appraisal product. It's not something that I would say that I'm an expert on. Again, just coming from my own background, coming from the background of others that I've associated with, that's where my opinion stems. But it's just my opinion. And I know that there's as many opinions out there as there are appraisers. But I do want to share with you just a few things, maybe to consider, maybe to think through if you find this interesting and find this appealing to you. On a very regular basis, we as real estate appraisers are completing valuation. I call us valuation experts. People come to us, whether they be lenders, whether they be homeowners, whether they be realtors or attorneys or what have you. Our clients come to us because we come with a certain skill set. We get that skill set through our education, through our experience, through our intuition, through a lot of different means allow us to be the expert that we are in valuation in the areas that we work. And that's why people come to us. So I think that there is a credible reason to believe that because people come to us for expertise, we need to do the very best that we can do to make sure that that expertise shines through, that we do due diligence, that we make our reports credible. Now, let's go back to USPAP 101 for just a minute. USPAP will state that standard 1 has to do with the methodology that we utilize to come up with the values that we come up with. In other words, it's the process that we go through. It is the appraisal, if you will, of the property. And then you've got on the other side, you have the opportunity to look on the report side of things. In other words, there's really two things we have to look at. And I fear that sometimes we as appraisers mix these things up. When we talk about an appraisal of a property, a lot of times in our mind and in our speech, we're referring to the report itself. Well, folks, that's not the appraisal. That is the appraisal report. In other words, it is an explanation, if you will. It is a description, and it is a write-up, a type-up of what we do as real estate appraisers. In other words, the process that we went through up here, and maybe on paper, maybe in our work file, maybe on the computer, but it really is the write-up of our findings. And here's a key, folks. It's not just our findings, but it is the process that we went through to get to that end result. Now, there are two parts of the appraisal report, as you all know. There is the appraisal report itself, what is delivered to the client, and then we have what we call the work file, which should contain enough sufficient information that you could recreate the report if 4.5 years from now you're called upon to do so, that you could go back and understand the methodology that you went through to get to the value, to get to the reporting process that you went through. Okay? Now, I set that up so that we can now talk about reconciliation, because reconciliation, I think, is something that is sometimes not given the credit that it is due. Reconciliation. This is my layman's definition. Okay, you can probably pull up an appraisal dictionary, an appraisal book, methodology, class, what have you. You could probably give a much better definition, but for purposes of the podcast today, reconciliation is simply taking the 3 approaches to value and the details of each approach to value and explaining to the reader why you came up with the thing that you came up with. Okay? It doesn't necessarily have to do with the comp selection. It does not necessarily have to do with the specifics of the adjustments, though that could be part of it. But really, why the value? Why did you come up with $395,000 for this property? It is the process of allowing the user to be able to see inside your head, to read your report, and then say to themselves, okay, maybe I don't agree, but at least I understand where he or she is coming from. That's reconciliation. That is much different than CYA addendum. Okay? CYA addendum, to me, is a much broader, much longer, much lengthier, much more detailed boilerplate, if you will, crossing your T's, dotting your I's in issues that may come up with your client. Okay? So in my appraisal office, we basically have 2, if you will. Now, there's more than this. There's more explanation and detail in each of our reports. But for purposes of what we're talking about today, to make it simple to those who are listening, we really have 2 addendums, if you will. One of them being what I call the CYA. No, it's not labeled that in my report. Okay, CYA, what does that stand for? But it's there, and that's what I refer to it as, because it's basically the little nuts and bolts of things that over 22 years of doing this, I have had people come back on me. Why didn't you address that? How did you do this? What's your methodology here? These are things that never change. These are things that just are. And so there's an explanation, a 2-page explanation, if you will, as to, why we do the things that we do. That is not sufficient to explain the value on an appraisal report. Let me repeat that. The CYA addendum goes in every report. It is general. It is generic on purpose. It is not specific to the appraisal that you are dealing with today. And that's what the reconciliation is all about. The reconciliation to me is a paragraph or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how complex the property was, depending on how complex the valuation process was, depending on how complex did you do the income approach, the cost approach, the market approach? Which one did you rely upon for value? Now, there's some certain things that I would say probably are pretty similar in most reconciliation paragraphs. Therefore, I have a pre-written reconciliation paragraph that is changed on every single report, but it starts with some very generic, specific, generic and specific. It is generic and it's specific. So it's generic in the sense that on 90% of the appraisals where I deal with, in the areas that I deal with, there's some comments that go in every single time. High adjustments, challenging to stay within 90 days. These are things that on 90% of my appraisals, I'm going to leave that comment in there. Now, those comments don't always stay there. On the 10% that it doesn't apply, or maybe in the 40% of the time when it applies, but not quite the way it's stated, it's easier for me to change the sentences that are already in the template than it is to rewrite from scratch. And so I start with a template and I start with a paragraph. But folks, here's the key. Reconciliation, by definition, must be specific to the subject property. Okay? That is the difference in my mind between the short 2 or 3 paragraphs that I call the reconciliation section and the CYA, or the general text addendum, is actually how it's labeled in my report. The general text addendum is, 1, 2 pages, maybe 3 pages if I remember correctly when you print them all out, of very generic information that may come up that explains, kind of our methodology. For example, how we typically adjust or don't adjust for a bedroom. Now, how I specifically did the bedroom adjustment in this report might be very specific in that reconciliation paragraph. Now, why does this come up? Dustin, what are you talking about? I've been appraising for 7 years, 15 years, 30 years, 40 years. I know what reconciliation is. It came up because on a recent online forum, the question was asked about reconciliation and specifically about how individuals reconcile their reports. And I found it very interesting. Again, no judgment here, not right, wrong, or indifferent. It just was interesting to me, some of the answers that were given that I want to share with you when we come back from the break. I want to first pause and remind you that we are sponsored by a la mode. Speaking of templates and speaking of the ease of the appraisal process, that's really what a la mode does for you folks. It is so easy to do an appraisal within let me back up. An appraisal report, which is different than an appraisal. It's so easy to do an appraisal report within the a la mode software. Why? These folks have been in business over 30 years. They've been catering to the appraiser. I've been using them for over 20 years. And right now, folks, you can get a 15-day free trial. That's 2 weeks plus a day free trial at allamode.com/free trial. That's allamode.com/free trial. And once you decide to jump on board, folks, you will be honored. You'll be rewarded with a $349 per year for the next 10 years. You get all the bells and whistles that a la mode has to offer. Folks, check them out right now if you have not done so already. I mentioned at the first of the program that I'd been on the line with DataMaster. Folks, these guys are awesome guys, really. They truly care about the appraiser. They are making some changes in their software. Those will be rolling out over the next several months. And, they reached out to me because I am an appraiser. And not just because they sponsor on this program, but because they truly care about where the appraiser is and the boots on the ground and how this stuff works. And they wanted my opinion. I gave them my opinion. They're going to tweak a few things because of my opinion, but they're not just reaching out to Dustin Harris. They're reaching out to appraisers across the nation and asking for their feedback. That's the kind of company that they are. Check them out right now, folks. If you want a free trial, 14 days, you can go to datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. I know it's long. Please put it in, folks, because it tells them you're listening. datamasterfreetrial.com/coach for your full 14 days, unlimited downloads. Folks, if they are in your area, you need to be using DataMaster. This company knows what they're doing. Speaking of another company that knows what they're doing, that's doing things a little bit different. In fact, a lot different than other E&O companies. It's OREP. Folks, I was with another company. It's a big company. You would recognize the name if I threw it out there, for a very long time. And then I switched over to OREP. OREP, folks, saved me money. Saved me money on my premium the first year and the second year, and I'm assuming they'll probably save me money next year as well. Not only that, but OREP has all kinds of benefits. If you don't believe me, go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. Click on the benefits section of the website. Do the drop down. look at the many, many benefits, the webinars, the educational opportunities, the CE credits, the Working RE magazine, the opportunity to talk to a real former state board member if you ever get taken before your state board, free of charge, a 30-minute consultation with that individual. Folks, this stuff is priceless. Check it out right now at orep.org. That's OREP.org. And welcome back, folks. You're listening to the Appraiser Coach Podcast. My name's Dustin Harris. We're talking about reconciliation. I know it doesn't sound exciting, but this came an interesting conversation was online here recently about reconciliation. The question was basically asked, hey, I was, and I'm paraphrasing, but the individual said something about, I think, I'm doing a field review or a desk review, and the appraiser is using percentages in their reconciliation to show how much weight they gave each and every comp. And the guy just thought it was just crazy weird and threw this out to the audience, to the Facebook audience, if you will, and said, have you guys ever seen this before? Man, I tell you, the question itself was flabbergasting to me because I've done that for years and years and years. What was even more surprising to me was the response that came on the flip side of that, the response that came from the commenters, the appraisers that were answering back to this individual and talking about reconciliation, talking about percentages. Now, let me set up the question just so you are clear as to what he's asking, because I was super surprised that most of the commenters had not only not used this methodology, but not ever heard of this methodology. So I feel it's incumbent for those of you who don't use this or who don't know about it to kind of explain what I'm talking about. And that is, let's say that we've got, 3 comparables, okay? Or let's say there's 4 comparables. But let's say the fourth one you put in just, because you needed to bracket something, but it's not really a good comparable. You don't really want to give it any weight, okay? Or maybe you want to give it a little bit of weight, but not a whole lot. So in my reconciliation, I typically always come up with a percentage for each comparable. What that means basically is as I'm describing what the methodology that I went through and whether or not I use the cost approach and the income approach and why or why not, and then I start talking about the sales comparison approach in the reconciliation, I'm talking about the adjustments that I made and why I made an adjustment for comp number 3 because of the condition, specifically why I made, not just it's nicer or it's been remodeled, but specifically what has been remodeled, the materials, the shape that they're in, those kind of things. That's the kind of thing I go into in my reconciliation section. But I also talk about how much weight I gave to each comparable. I think that's so crucial, so important, okay? And the way that I do this, so I might say something to the effect of comparables 1 through 3 were very similar to the subject, all sold within 90 days, very little adjustments. Therefore, they were each given 30% in the reconciliation. Sale 4 was included to bracket on the high end, but it had a guest house and was not truly comparable to the subject. Maybe it was outside the neighborhood, what have you. Therefore, it was given 10% weight. In other words, those weights have to add up to, of course, 100%. Where did I derive the information from? Now, what was interesting to me is I thought that was just standard appraisal practice. And again, I'm not saying whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying that's the way I've always done it. I shouldn't say always done it, but at least the last 12 years I've done it that way in pretty much every single appraisal report. What was interesting to me was the commenters on the Facebook post and how many of them basically said, what? Like, why would you do that? Like, I've never heard of that before in my life. Folks, to me, again, this is just my opinion. It's just one guy's opinion, right? I think it's crazy that you wouldn't do something. And here's why. Here's my justification for it. Okay, if I'm a reviewer and I'm looking at something and I'm seeing, let's say I'm seeing 4 comps. Let's keep it easy. I'm seeing 4 comps, and let's say one is adjusting out. These are adjusted values, not actual sales price. Adjusted values. Let's say I'm doing this off the top of my head, but let's say it's 370, 380, 420. And 310, right? I mean, by the way, folks, I know some of you in these, urban areas are thinking, okay, Dustin, what the heck are you talking about? Like, you would never have that kind of spread. Well, guess what, folks? Welcome to Idaho and Western Wyoming, because I have that kind of a spread in my reports all the time. They're all over the place, and sometimes there's no explanation for it, right? Now, maybe it's not quite as dramatic as I just gave you, but you've got these comps that are all over the place, and then you say in your reconciliation that I weighted comp number 1 most and gave minimal adjustments to everything else, and I came up with 395. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm not looking at the spreadsheet. I'm just throwing out numbers, okay? The numbers are not the point. Those of you sitting down with a calculator, I know who you are. I'm just talking about in general where you state a value and then very generically say where that value came from. Folks, again, this is just one guy's opinion, but I don't know if that's the due diligence that we need to be doing as appraisers, because remember, the point of the appraisal report is so that the user understands what the appraiser did, the appraisal process. And if you simply state that I gave more weight to comp number 1 than I give to 2 and 3, how much more? I think that's important. I really do. When we're dealing with a value on a home, I can't tell you how many times I have either done a desk review or a field review. Now, I don't do a lot of those lately because, frankly, I've priced myself out of that market because I really feel that when you do a review, I don't mean to get off in the weeds here, but I feel when we do a review, we're doing 2 things. We're doing an appraisal, really, and then we're doing a review of an appraisal, okay? And so I've priced myself out of that market because I know there's other guys out there doing them for much less than I'm willing to do that for. That being said, when I have done desk and field reviews, and I look at that reconciliation section, and my peer appraiser has said nothing, first of all, about what weights were given. Or if they do, it's very generic in stating that I gave more weights to 1 and 2 than I did to 3 and 4. Folks, that doesn't tell me much. How much more weight? Did you give 50% to comp 1, 40% to comp 2, 5% to 3 and 4 respectively? I don't know. You didn't say. And consequently, I'm looking at your number and I'm thinking, okay, standing on my head, biting my tongue, trying to figure out where this value came from. Again, folks, my opinion, you may go to the state board. You may be taken to court. You may just fare perfectly fine in a very generic statement about your reconciliation. I just think it's better appraisal practice to tell the user where the information came from. I think it is better to tell them exactly where the reconciliation. Now, I know some of the commenters on the Facebook feed said, "Why would you paint yourself into a corner and get that detailed?" Okay, I can see that side of the argument. I truly can. When I was being taught as an appraiser, my instructor said something that I will never forget. Many of you have heard this analogy. I think it's a good one. And he said, measure with a micrometer and cut with a chainsaw. In other words, you measure to the very detail, but you can't get that detailed. And specifically, maybe you wouldn't want an appraisal that came in at $395,252, right? I mean, who's that good? I don't know anybody that's that good. And I think it actually does you a disservice to try to get that specific, because none of us can measure the market that precisely, right? So, but I think we can measure it precisely enough to at least tell the user where the weights came from. Again, my opinion, if you disagree, please comment, both on the website, theappraisercoach.com, and or on YouTube, now that we're on video. Folks, thanks for joining us today. I want to remind you about the All-Star team. Right now, it is $9.95 per month. Folks, that is a steal for what you get. Now, what do you get? You get an unlimited amount of information going back now 3.5 years of detailed information about how Dustin Harris runs his appraisal business that's much, much different than my peers do. $9.95 a month gives you a full 8-page newsletter every single month, as well as access to a private and closed Facebook group where we have an opportunity to interact in a kind and gentle manner where we don't jump down each other's throats. Please join us, folks. It's the All-Star team. You can go to my website, theappraisercoach.com, to learn more. Catch you next week.